Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of our discussion on the Screwtape Letters. We are up to Chapter 5. This will be our seventh video on discussion. And how do we get 7 from 5? That's because we started with Chapters 8 and 9 earlier on. So we are coming back around. Joining me once again is Aaron Hussey. He's been a long-term time friend of mine. And we're going to, just without wasting much time on the intro, I'm just going to jump right into it and get into Chapter 5. And to be honest, when I first read it, I didn't really have much I could say about it. I basically, the first time I read through, my first impressions were that, war is a man's doing and not not the devil's. That seemed to be one point of view that C.S. Lewis tried to apply, and that while the pain and suffering that war brings upon us upon mankind, is something that the devil enjoys. It's short-lived, and it can also work against the devil. So that was the initial impressions I got. So Aaron, I'll ask what your first impressions were of the chapter.
Yeah, sure. I read it twice as well, and the first time I said, "Oh, okay, well that was a breeze." I didn't take notes and had the same kind of observations. Then I read it a second time, and I found myself just highlighting some things about the main theme of the chapter, but also the very first paragraph I just highlighted. It's an introduction. It's kind of reinforcing some things we've already talked about with some of the other chapters. So I highlighted that. And then I highlighted a couple things towards the back. So after the discussion of war, there were some things that I found kind of interesting. So the first thing was uh, basically Screwtape is talking to Wormwood and he's giving him a little bit of a reprimand. It's kind of how the evil forces manage each other. Uh, kind of our bad management here in real life. They act just like it. They reprimand and fear instead of any encouragement. So he's reprimanding him as usual and saying, "Don't get cocky," essentially. But then the thing I highlighted was, did the patient respond to some of your terror pictures? Did you work in some good self-pitying glances at the happy past?
That's funny.
Um,
You and I highlighted the same sentence.
yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have some thinking alike going there.
Yeah, so I thought that reinforced some of the things we've talked about, how uh, our minds are used by the enemy, our memory, our imagination, our reason, our conscience, and our affections. And those are all gates to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that at the very first session, and I think this reinforced that. So that's kind of how I started.
Yeah, I saw that one. How the devil tries to take us off off our take our mind off the present, whether it's remind us of the past, um, the good times of the past. Think about things other times. Things that aren't relevant to now. We'll never get back, and take our mind off the present. And going along with that, there's it's not spoken here, but I guess it's just as effective as worrying about the future. Uh, worrying about things that haven't come yet. So it's worrying about things that have gone in the past that you can't get back, and worrying about things in the future that you can't have control of. Well, that's the terror pictures of the future. That's part of it. I guess those are the two things. It just takes you off the present. And how isn't it true that we do that so easily?
And what I found interesting about that first opening was that Screwtape's telling Wormwood, "That's all nice, and you're proud of yourself for being able to do that. But that's just like playing the violin. You haven't captured this guy's soul yet."
Mm.
And then they get into the wartime. So that paragraph I also highlighted. Um, Screwtape to ask Wormwood to give him a full account of the patient's reaction to the war. What I liked about that is he said whether what will he asked Wormwood to note whether being an extreme patriot or an ardent pacifist would be the angle they should play against him in the future. So it's kind of interesting. It's like
Did you
far
read my
left,
notes ahead
far
of time?
right. So,
Did you happen to read my notes ahead of time?
so you caught that too.
Yeah, same thing.
I found that entertaining to read, and I said, well, we can certainly apply that today, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. It's you know, it's um, going one direction, going to one extreme or the other, right? It's you know, you take on somebody who's an extreme patriot, and you look at things like the Vietnam era or the Korean era war, and time in our own history, and the extremists of anti communists, anti-communism back then, they were so extreme that they did not, and they started not caring about people's personal rights for the sake of um, defeating communism. And even in recent years, there's been arguments, whatever, people have differing views, but our response to all the terror since 2001, the all the laws and the things that we've done. There's the question: have we gone too far in trying to have we taken away people's freedoms and rights in the effort to get rid of terrorism? So that's the extreme patriot side, and the ardent pacifist is the one who's the no war, no fighting side, and they basically become then they allow. No, I'm kind of lost on that one, I guess, but I'm not sure how the ardent pacifist serves the devil. But I can see how the extreme patriot can certainly serve.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I guess if you went so far with pacifism where you ignored some of the evils that are going on and didn't step up and take care of it, for example, ISIS, maybe. I
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a recent example where things got out of hand, probably because country, uh, I'm glad the U.S. isn't entangled too much in it all, but at the same time, what would have happened if we were extremely pacifist and didn't get involved with World War II, right? Yeah,
yeah. I see what you're saying there. So being ardent passives, we get to a point where we almost turn a blind eye
yeah,
to other people's sinful behavior in an effort to avoid the war and fighting and conflict. Yeah,
yeah,
I can see where that could definitely be in play, because if a person's not standing up or not willing to correct sinful behavior, that sinful behavior is allowed to flourish and grow. But at the same time, if we go too far on the extreme patriot side, then we can become the sinful behavior that we meant to stop.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And I think you can extend that down into kind of conflicts at a lower level in family life and stuff. You can sweep things under the rug by being so pacifist. It happens a lot. Um, yeah, so the core kind of chapter talks about war, and I don't know what you have to say about kind of the overall strategy during wartime, but the thing I have highlighted was that something about values and causes,
Hmm.
where Worm Screwtape was essentially saying that don't get so excited about wartime because what happens is these humans they uh, they tend to transcend themselves while they're suffering. And actually, that's the main point I take out of all of this is suffering. Somehow, suffering, and we know this, suffering leads them to values and causes higher than themselves, and then they look towards God.
Mm.
And that seems to be the whole fear of evil in this case.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Oh, there it is. Yep. Yeah, I highlighted a section just above that. Um, if we're not careful, we shall see thousands turning in this tribulation to the enemy, while tens of thousands who do not go so far as that will nevertheless have their attention diverted from themselves to vows and call. Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't have a note on that. Yeah, I highlighted that. That was interesting because, yeah, what's that? What's that old saying? There are no no atheists in foxholes.
Yeah.
That war tends to take your mind off of yourself. Well, I mean, okay, well, think about it. I mean, you think about how many people look to the war ravaged countries and seek to try to help them, or when there's war times, we do look beyond ourselves to other people suffering and try to look outside of ourselves. It's part of that human nature. So we stop looking at our own problems and and then a lot of people. I mean, you look at 9/11 and the statistics out were that many more people. I don't know what the numbers are, but many more people attended church for while a brief period of time, but for a time afterwards, they sought they sought God in that tribulation of the terrorist attacks. Um, so yeah, that's very fitting that it's still just as valid in 2001 now and as it was back when C.S. Lewis wrote this.
Yeah. So Screwtape saying, this is fun and have fun with it, but be warned that humans will transcend themselves and look towards God at some point, and you have to be aware of that. And I think that's true. And it also explains, if you look at all the teaching in the Bible that tells us all that we're to suffer
Mm-hmm.
and to rejoice in suffering, and that was Christ's whole plan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, winning all of time's battles all on the cross through his suffering, and that's actually what gave him the title deed to planet Earth and defeated death and hell. So it's the whole plan is suffering, and I think this is the opposite perspective on that. It's kind of, this chapter was kind of neat because it was an open acknowledgement that um, uh, that there's nothing evil can do when people start looking towards a higher power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I went on to highlight um, three portions where uh, Screwtape goes on to say it's better for us if humans are in a comfortable environment. He says costly nursing homes amid doctors who lie, nurses who lie, friends who lie, as we've trained them. Uh, and so comfortable environments, and I thought, yeah, that's kind of where you can lead more people astray, right? Through humans.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I think because he leads into that, and I highlighted that same sentence. Uh, he leads into it about kind of talking about the martyr's death. Um, where people, will give their lives for something, rather, so that sense of, we rally behind wartime heroes, don't we? Somebody who suffered greatly, either came back and did a heroic deed and either died or was injured. We rally behind those people. We get encouraged by them, and we say they caused for they died or they fought or were injured for a good cause, and we rally behind that. So yeah, how much better is it that we're for the enemy, for the Satan, uh, that we aren't dying for a cause that's great, that we're given a chance to doubt our faith. We're because I mean, what how discouraging is it that you hear as you're saying is if we have doctors who are trying to make us feel better and say, oh, you'll be fine, you'll live and you're going to live fine, and then all of a sudden the next prognosis is, well, we found this, and it's not as good as it, it's all of a sudden all throughout that process, and how many people start questioning their faith. uh, I was listening to a speaker a couple months ago, and he's talking about his mother when his father was very ill. I think his father went comatose for a while, and how his mother was struggling with her faith. I think that's how he put it. His mother was struggling with her faith as she was trying to deal with her husband going through suffering on the bed. So for the family, she brought, for her it was challenging to witness it. So even not only for the patient patients, who are dying in nursing homes, but for the family who is watching them, stay strong. So I definitely see what C.S. Lewis is trying to say there. I mean, I've got an uncle who's my aunt is dealing with. I think it's all Alzheimer's or dementia. Very very harsh case of it where when I visited her over Thanksgiving, she didn't recognize me, and um, so it's a tough one. He's got a lot of strength I pray for him for strength to maintain, be able to endure, because it's not an easy thing to have to endure that and maintain your faith through, dealing with why your loved one is fading away in front of you.
Yeah, no doubt. So the uh, chapter kind of rounds out, or at least the last thing I highlighted was the term called diffused suffering, the long periods of suffering, such as you were just describing. And I think we all go through periods of that in our life, one way or the other. And uh, so Screwtape's essentially saying that long period of suffering, we don't win very well there. It's overrated how much evil can manipulate people in those situations. They look towards the higher power. He does say, he then goes on to say, though, of course, at a moment of terror, bereavement, physical pain, you can catch your man when his reason is temporarily suspended. So it's those kind of sudden things in life that come, terrible things that come, and they're not sustained periods of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
where our reason is tricked, and the enemy really tries to just get us off track. So so that's kind of how we rounded out the chapter, and I thought it was pretty interesting perspective is this older, more seasoned demon Screwtape giving these lessons to Wormwood, his nephew, and just saying, "Hey, don't get cocky about this. It may seem like a ripe opportunity, but it's those little things that are going to do much more for you."
Yeah, yeah. Stepping back before that, the end of the last paragraph, I highlighted contented worldliness, and so and in wartime, not even a human can believe that he is going to live forever. So it's I guess when our mortality is brought into question, we often start thinking about about what happens afterwards. And so, isn't it interesting how when we're young, we never think about what's to come. We think we're going to live forever, and then you start getting our age, and then we start going feeling the aches and pains of life and struggles, and then I guess when you get to our parents' age, it gets even closer to the reality, and we start to then you start to worry about did we do enough in our life, and it's interesting how I guess wartime does a similar thing. Is it truncates that sense of living for life to a much shorter period of time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it truncates it. That's a good way to put it.
Uh, yeah,
You got 18-year-old soldiers out there, and they're staring death in their face every day, and it has to change their whole outlook on life.
yeah. I remember when my brother was deployed for 6 months in Iraq. I realized that I hadn't really. I had talked about my faith with him a couple times, but nothing in detail. So I wrote him an email. It was a real in-depth email about my story, about where I was, what I, my pre-Christ life, and afterwards what brought me around, why I believe what I believe, because I realized with him going over there, even though he was not in the war zone, it was Iraq and a world at wartime. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to miss the chance to explain to him, and so that was kind of same sense as not my life but his, that I uh, didn't want to let slip through without having a chance to explain, and so it gave me a different a sense of urgency uh, in that context.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Good. Well, that pretty well sums it up from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I think so too. So, well, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everybody who's watching. Again, we enjoy, Aaron and I enjoy talking about this, whether you're watching or not. And it's fun. This is our way to kind of record, and we can always look back later and enjoy these videos. So, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next chapter. Have a good one.